The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it did every weekday morning. Maya Chen rolled over in her tiny studio apartment, groaning as she reached for the snooze button. 5 more minutes wouldn't hurt, right? Wrong. She had exactly 45 minutes to get ready, catch the bus, and make it to Corner Brew Cafe before the morning rush hit downtown Seattle like a caffeine-fueled tsunami. Maya stumbled out of bed, her feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. The apartment was small enough that she could touch both walls if she stretched her arms wide, but it was hers. Well, technically it belonged to her landlord, but after 2 years of paying rent on time, it felt like home. The walls were covered with certificates and diplomas that told the story of her academic journey. A bachelor's degree in linguistics from the University of Washington, a master's in applied linguistics and international business, academic achievement awards, language proficiency certificates in 6 different languages. All of that education, and here she was about to spend another day making lattes and cappuccinos for people who rushed past her, like she was invisible. She pulled on her jeans and the purple sweater her grandmother had knitted for her last Christmas. The sweater was getting a bit worn around the edges, but it was warm and reminded her of family back in Portland. Maya looked at herself in the bathroom mirror while brushing her teeth. Dark circles under her eyes from staying up late the night before, working on freelance translation projects that paid just enough to cover her student loan payments. 26 years old with 2 degrees and fluent in 6 languages, yet she was making barely enough to survive in one of the most expensive cities in America. Her friends from college were working at tech companies, law firms, and consulting agencies. They posted pictures on social media of their fancy offices, business trips, and weekend getaways. Maya posted pictures of latte art and the occasional sunset from the cafe window. The bus ride to downtown took 30 minutes, giving her time to review her mental checklist for the day. Tuesday meant the business district would be packed with office workers grabbing their morning coffee before important meetings. She knew most of the regulars by now. There was the lawyer who always ordered a double espresso with no sugar, the marketing executive who wanted her oat milk latte extra hot, the construction supervisor who liked his coffee black and strong enough to wake the dead. Maya had always been good with people. Maybe it came from growing up in a multilingual household where switching between English and Mandarin was as natural as breathing. Her parents had immigrated from Taiwan when she was 3 years old, and they made sure she never forgot her roots. At home, they spoke Mandarin. At school, she learned English. In high school, she discovered she had a natural talent for picking up new languages. Spanish came easily because of the Mexican family that lived next door. French was required in college, and she fell in love with the way the words rolled off her tongue. German was challenging but logical, like solving a complex puzzle. Italian was pure music to her ears. By graduation, she was fluent in all 6 languages and dreamed of working for an international company, or maybe the United Nations. Reality had other plans. The job market was brutal. Every position required 3 to 5 years of experience, but how could she get experience if no one would hire her without experience? She applied to hundreds of jobs. International corporations, translation agencies, government positions, nonprofit organizations. The rejections piled up like autumn leaves. Too inexperienced, overqualified, not the right fit. Budget constraints. Position filled internally. Corner Brew Cafe had been meant to be temporary. Just something to pay the bills while she looked for a real job in her field. That was 18 months ago. The cafe sat on the corner of Pine Street and 2nd Avenue, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a small bookstore that somehow survived despite everyone buying books online. It was nothing fancy. 12 small tables, a long counter with an espresso machine that had seen better days, and a pastry case filled with muffins and croissants from a local bakery. The walls were painted a warm yellow that made everything feel sunny even on Seattle's famously gray days. Maya unlocked the front door and flipped the sign from closed to open. The familiar smell of coffee beans and vanilla greeted her like an old friend. She tied her black apron around her waist and started the opening routine she could do in her sleep. Grind the beans, clean the espresso machine, arrange the pastries, fill the napkin dispensers, check the register. By 7 a.m., the first customers started trickling in, the early birds who needed caffeine before they could function. Maya greeted each one with a smile that was genuine, even if her job wasn't her dream career. She had learned that a kind word and perfectly made coffee could brighten someone's entire day. The morning rush was like conducting an orchestra. Maya moved between the espresso machine, the register, and the coffee grinders with practiced efficiency. Steam hissed. Beans ground. The register dinged. Customers chatted about their plans for the day, while she crafted their drinks with the precision of an artist. Mrs. Rodriguez, the office manager from the building across the street, ordered her usual café con leche and complimented Maya's Spanish pronunciation. David, the graphic designer who worked late nights, stumbled in looking like he needed life support and left with a triple-shot Americano and a grateful nod. The college students from nearby Seattle University huddled in the corner, making their single drinks last for hours while they studied for exams. Maya loved these small interactions. In a world where everyone was always rushing, always stressed, the cafe was like a small island of human connection. She remembered drink orders not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared about the people she served every day. Around 8:30, the second wave hit. The business professionals who had slightly more flexible schedules. They wore expensive suits and carried leather briefcases. They talked loudly on their phones about quarterly reports and client meetings. Most of them were polite but distracted, already mentally at their offices before they even left the cafe. Maya had learned to read people quickly, the stressed-out executive who needed their coffee fast and didn't want to chat, the friendly middle manager who always asked about her day, the nervous job interviewee who practiced their elevator pitch while waiting for their drink. She adjusted her approach to match what each person needed, sometimes offering encouragement, sometimes just efficient service. Her language skills occasionally came in handy when international visitors found the cafe. She had helped lost tourists in Spanish, comforted a homesick exchange student in French, and even translated a menu for some German business travelers. These moments reminded her why she had studied languages in the first place. Communication was about more than just words. It was about connecting with people, understanding their needs, making them feel heard and valued. As the morning wore on, Maya found herself thinking about the future. How long could she keep doing this? Her student loans weren't getting any smaller. Her parents kept asking when she would find a job that matched her education. Her college friends were getting promoted, buying houses, starting families. She was still serving coffee and living paycheck to paycheck, but something told her that today might be different. Maybe it was the way the morning light streamed through the cafe windows, casting everything in a golden glow. Maybe it was the excited energy of the customers talking about important meetings and big deals. Or maybe it was just wishful thinking from someone who desperately wanted her life to change. Maya wiped down the counter and prepared for whatever the day might bring, completely unaware that her biggest opportunity was about to walk through the door in an expensive suit, looking frustrated and speaking rapidly into a phone in 3 different languages. The morning rush was starting to slow down when Maya noticed him. He walked through the door like he owned the building, but something was off. His gray hair was perfectly styled. His navy suit looked like it cost more than Maya made in 3 months, and his leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine. But his face told a different story. Stress lines creased his forehead, and his jaw was tight with frustration. Robert Sterling stopped just inside the door, his phone pressed against his ear, speaking in rapid German. Maya could understand every word, though she pretended to focus on cleaning the espresso machine. He was talking about production delays, something about machinery breaking down in Munich. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being in charge, but there was an edge of panic that made Maya look up despite herself. He found a table in the corner, away from the other customers, and spread out a stack of papers. Even from across the cafe, Maya could see charts, technical drawings, and what looked like contracts in multiple languages. The man pulled out a tablet, a laptop, and 2 different phones. This wasn't someone checking emails over coffee. This was a command center. Maya approached his table with her best customer service smile. "Good morning. What can I get started for you today?" The man looked up, clearly annoyed at being interrupted, but caught himself. Coffee, black, strong. His accent was slight but noticeable. American, but someone who had spent time overseas. "Coming right up," Maya said, backing away as his phone rang again. This time he answered in French, his tone sharp and impatient. Maya's ears perked up as she ground fresh beans. He was talking to someone in Paris about shipping delays. A container ship had been held up in customs, and critical components weren't going to arrive on schedule. The person on the other end was speaking too fast. mixing technical terms with slang that was clearly confusing him. Maya poured the coffee, extra strong like he requested, and brought it to his table. He barely acknowledged her, waving his hand while continuing his conversation. She lingered for a moment, pretending to wipe down the nearby tables, listening to him struggle with the French words for quality specifications and delivery timeline. The call ended badly. The man stared at his phone like it had personally betrayed him, then immediately dialed another number. This conversation was in Italian, and it wasn't going any better. He was trying to explain technical requirements to what sounded like a manufacturing facility, but the person on the other end kept asking for clarification. Maya could hear the confusion in both voices, the frustration building on both sides of the call. Other customers were starting to notice. The businessman at the next table kept glancing over, clearly annoyed by the loud phone conversations. A group of college students in the corner was whispering and pointing. Maya felt bad for the man. He was obviously dealing with something important, but he was becoming a distraction for everyone else in the cafe. The Italian call ended with what sounded like nothing resolved. The man ran his hands through his hair, messing up that perfect styling for the first time. He stared at his papers, shuffling through contracts and technical drawings like he was looking for answers that weren't there. His phone buzzed with a text message. Maya watched his face change as he read it. Whatever the message said, it wasn't good news. He immediately called another number, this time speaking English with someone who was obviously his assistant. "Jennifer? Thank God you answered. I know you're sick, but I need help. The Munich facility is down. Paris is confused about the shipping requirements, and Milan keeps asking questions I can't answer. Can you conference call the team leaders?" Maya could hear the woman on the other end, her voice hoarse and weak. She was clearly too sick to work, apologizing repeatedly while explaining that she could barely get out of bed, let alone coordinate international conference calls. The man's shoulders sagged. No, don't worry about it. Get some rest. I'll figure something out." He hung up and stared at the ceiling like he was asking for divine intervention. Maya had never seen someone look so defeated while wearing such an expensive suit. He tried calling someone else, speaking German again, but this conversation was even worse than the others. Technical terms were getting lost in translation, and she could hear both sides getting more and more frustrated. The call ended abruptly when the person on the other end hung up in frustration. The man looked at his phone in disbelief, then set it down harder than necessary. He picked up his coffee cup, took a sip, and made a face. It had gone cold while he was dealing with his crisis. Maya was torn. She wanted to help, but this wasn't her problem. This was clearly some high-level business issue that was way above her pay grade. Still, she could see the man was drowning. Every phone call was making things worse instead of better. Language barriers were turning what should have been simple communications into impossible puzzles. The man tried one more call, this time in French again. He was speaking slower now, trying to be more careful with his pronunciation, but it wasn't working. The person on the other end was getting impatient, asking him to repeat things multiple times. Maya could see sweat starting to form on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Suddenly, his phone slipped from his hands. He tried to catch it, but it clattered to the floor, and all his papers scattered everywhere. Technical drawings slid under other tables. Contracts spread across the cafe floor like oversized confetti. The man dropped to his knees, frantically trying to gather everything while other customers stared. Maya didn't think. She just moved. She was on the floor beside him, helping collect the scattered documents. As she picked up the papers, she couldn't help but see what they contained. Manufacturing specifications in German, quality control requirements in French, shipping instructions in Italian, technical drawings with notes in at least 4 different languages. "Thank you," the man said, his voice tired and grateful. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. This isn't exactly how I planned to spend my morning." Maya handed him a stack of papers, noticing his hands were slightly shaking. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to rattle someone who clearly wasn't used to being rattled. She could see phone numbers from international companies, shipping manifests with dates that were already past due, and contract amendments with urgent stamps across the top. As they both stood up, the man's phone rang again. He looked at it like it was a snake, clearly dreading another failed conversation with another confused international partner. Maya could see the cycle starting all over again. More phone calls, more miscommunication, more frustration. and more problems that would only get worse as the day went on. The other customers in the cafe were trying to pretend they weren't watching, but everyone could feel the tension. This wasn't just someone having a bad day. This was someone whose bad day was about to become a disaster that would ripple out far beyond one corner cafe in downtown Seattle. Maya stood there holding the man's papers, watching him prepare for another phone call that probably wouldn't go any better than the last 5. Something inside her was screaming that she could help, that her language skills weren't just academic achievements gathering dust on her apartment wall. They were tools that could actually solve real problems for real people. But who was she to offer help to someone who was obviously running some kind of major international operation? She was just a barista with student loans and big dreams that hadn't come true yet. Maya stood there for what felt like forever, holding the stack of technical papers, watching Robert stare at his phone like it was about to explode. The cafe around them had gone quiet. Even the espresso machine seemed to sense the tension and had stopped its usual hissing and gurgling. Her heart was pounding. Everything in her head was telling her to walk away, mind her own business, go back to making lattes for people who actually wanted her help. But her conscience wouldn't let her move. She had just listened to this man struggle through 5 different phone calls, watching him get more frustrated and desperate with each conversation, and she could help. She actually could solve his problem. The voice in her head sounded exactly like her mother. Maya, don't get involved in other people's business. You don't know what kind of trouble this man is dealing with. But another voice, one that sounded like her linguistics professor from college, was saying something completely different. Language is a bridge, not a wall. Use your skills to connect people, not just to pass exams. Robert's phone rang again. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and answered in German. Maya could tell immediately that this was going to be another disaster. He was trying to explain quality control standards to someone who clearly didn't understand what he was talking about. The person on the other end was asking questions that Robert couldn't answer properly, because he didn't know the right technical terms in German. Entschuldigung, Robert said, his pronunciation making Maya wince slightly. Können Sie das wiederholen? He was asking the person to repeat something, but his grammar was off and she could hear confusion in the German speaker's voice. That's when Maya made her decision. She stepped forward, her hands still full of his papers, and cleared her throat softly. Excuse me, sir, she said quietly, trying not to startle him. I don't mean to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. I speak German, French, and Italian fluently. Would you like some help with your calls? Robert stared at her like she had just offered to perform surgery on his kitchen table. His eyebrows went up so high they almost disappeared into his hairline. You speak, what? German, French, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, and English, Maya said, feeling her cheeks get warm. I have a master's degree in applied linguistics. I know this might sound crazy, but I understood everything you were trying to say in those calls, and I think I could help translate. For a moment, Robert didn't say anything. Maya could practically see the wheels turning in his head. He looked at her barista apron, then at his scattered business documents, then back at her face. The person on his phone was still talking in German, asking if he was still there. You're serious, Robert said. It wasn't a question. Completely serious, Maya replied. Look, I know this is weird. I'm just a barista, and you're obviously dealing with something really important. But those calls aren't working, and I can hear both sides getting more confused every time you try to explain something. If you want, I can help you communicate what you actually need to say. Robert looked at his phone, where the German voice was getting more impatient by the second. He looked around the cafe, where other customers were pretending not to watch their conversation. Then he looked back at Maya, and something in his expression changed. Desperation won over skepticism. Okay, he said, handing her the phone. This is Heinrich from our Munich manufacturing facility. We need to explain that the metal specifications have changed, but the strength requirements are the same. The technical drawings show the new measurements, but he's confused about whether this affects the timeline. Maya took the phone, her hand surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. Hallo Heinrich, she said in perfect German. Hier ist Maya, ich helfe Herrn Sterling heute mit der Übersetzung. The change on Heinrich's end was immediate. Maya could hear the relief in his voice as she explained who she was and why she was calling. She spent the next 10 minutes walking Heinrich through the technical specifications, translating not just the words but the concepts behind them. When Heinrich had questions about timeline impacts, Maya relayed them to Robert in English. then translated Robert's answers back into German with the proper technical terminology. By the end of the call, Heinrich was actually laughing, thanking Maya for the clear communication, and promising that production would resume immediately with the new specifications. Robert was staring at Maya like she had just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Where did you learn to speak like that? University, Maya said, handing him back his phone. But more importantly, you have 2 more calls to make, right? The Paris shipping issue and the Milan quality control questions. The next call was to Paris. Maya switched to French as naturally as changing radio stations. The shipping coordinator, Claude, had been confused about container specifications and customs requirements. Maya explained the exact dimensions and weight requirements in technical French, then helped Robert understand the European shipping regulations that Claude was trying to explain. Ah, maintenant je comprends, Claude said, his voice full of relief. Now I understand. Within 15 minutes they had the shipping schedule back on track, and the customs paperwork properly filled out. The Italian call was the most complex. The manufacturing facility in Milan had quality control questions about a new production process. The conversation involved chemistry terms, engineering specifications, and Italian regulations that Robert had no hope of understanding on his own. Maya found herself translating not just between English and Italian, but between different technical vocabularies. When the Italian quality manager, Giuseppe, used a specific term for metal density that didn't have a direct English equivalent, Maya explained the concept to Robert in plain English, then relayed Robert's response back to Giuseppe using the proper Italian technical language. Perfetto, Giuseppe kept saying, perfect. He was so excited to finally understand the specifications clearly that he started talking faster, explaining how the new process would actually improve quality beyond what they had originally planned. Maya found herself completely absorbed in the conversations. This wasn't just translation. This was problem-solving on an international scale. Every technical term she had learned in her linguistics courses, every cultural nuance she had studied, every grammar rule she had memorized was suddenly useful in the real world. Between calls, Robert kept staring at her with amazement. Where did you learn to do this? This isn't just speaking languages. You're understanding complex technical concepts and explaining them in ways that make sense to each person. Maya felt a flush of pride that she hadn't experienced since graduating from college. Languages aren't just about words, she explained while Robert dialed the next number. They're about understanding how different cultures think about problems. Germans are very precise and want exact specifications. The French care about regulations and proper procedures. Italians focus on craftsmanship and quality. You have to translate the concepts, not just the vocabulary. As they worked through the final details with Milan, Maya realized that something magical was happening. For the first time in 18 months, she was using her education, her skills, and her natural abilities to solve real problems for real people. She wasn't just making coffee. She was making a difference. The other customers in the cafe had given up pretending not to watch. Some of them were openly staring as Maya switched between languages like a linguistic acrobat. A few people had their phones out, probably recording what looked like the most unusual business meeting in cafe history. When the last call ended successfully, Robert set down his phone and looked at Maya with something that might have been awe. 3 major international crises had been solved in less than an hour, all because a barista happened to speak 6 languages and wasn't afraid to offer help to a stranger. Robert sat back in his chair, staring at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. The stress lines on his forehead had disappeared. His shoulders were relaxed for the first time since he'd walked into the cafe. He looked at his phone, then at the stack of papers that had caused him so much panic an hour ago, then back at Maya. I don't understand, he said slowly. You just solved problems that my entire international team couldn't figure out in 3 days. Heinrich has been giving us the runaround for a week. The Paris office was ready to cancel our shipping contract. Milan was talking about shutting down production until we could clarify the specifications. Maya felt her cheeks getting warm. I just translated what you needed to say. It wasn't that complicated once everyone could understand each other. No, Robert said, shaking his head firmly. That wasn't just translation. You understood complex manufacturing processes, international shipping regulations, and quality control standards. You knew technical terminology in 3 different languages that most people don't even know in English. Where exactly did you learn all of this? Maya wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly feeling self-conscious. The other customers in the cafe were still watching them, and she was very aware that she was standing there in her work uniform, having just conducted high-level international business negotiations. I studied applied linguistics and international business in graduate school, she said. We had to learn technical vocabulary for different industries. Manufacturing, shipping, finance, technology. The idea was that translators need to understand the subjects they're translating, not just the languages. Robert picked up one of his papers, a technical drawing covered with notes in German. You read this like you've been working in manufacturing for years. I wrote my master's thesis on cross-cultural communication and international manufacturing partnerships, Maya admitted. I researched how language barriers affect productivity and quality control in global supply chains. I spent 2 years studying exactly the kind of problems you were dealing with today. And you're working as a barista. It wasn't a question, but Maya answered anyway. I couldn't find a job in my field. Everyone wanted someone with experience, but no one would give me experience. So I took this job to pay my student loans while I kept applying for positions. Robert was quiet for a long moment, looking around the cafe like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn wooden tables, the old espresso machine, the handwritten menu board. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. From the wallet, he took out a business card. I think you should have this, he said, holding it out to her. Maya took the card, expecting to see a generic business card with a phone number and email address. Instead, her eyes went wide as she read the elegant black lettering. Robert Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Global Industries. She looked up at Robert, then back at the card, then back at Robert. Sterling Global Industries, she repeated slowly. As in the Sterling Global Industries that operates in 47 countries? The one that employs over 200,000 people worldwide. 49 countries now, Robert said with a slight smile. We expanded into Vietnam and Bangladesh last year. Maya felt like the floor was tilting underneath her feet. She had studied Sterling Global Industries in her international business courses. They were one of the largest multinational corporations in the world, with manufacturing facilities, shipping operations, and distribution networks on every continent except Antarctica. You're Robert Sterling, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Robert Sterling. I read about you in my graduate coursework. You started the company in your garage 30 years ago and built it into a global empire. I prefer to think of it as a global family, Robert said. But yes, that's me. And what you just did saved us from what could have been a disaster costing millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. Maya's head was spinning. She looked around the cafe, at the customers who were still pretending not to eavesdrop, at her co-workers behind the counter who were staring with open mouths. I helped you with some phone calls. That's all. That's all. Robert laughed, a sound that was both amazed and delighted. Maya, do you have any idea what was at stake this morning? We have a multi-million-dollar contract with a European automotive company. The production delays in Munich, the shipping problems in Paris, and the quality control issues in Milan were all connected to the same project. If we couldn't resolve those problems by noon today, we would have lost the contract. He picked up his phone and showed her the screen. It's 11:15 a.m. You just saved a $200 million deal with 15 minutes to spare. Maya felt like she needed to sit down. $200 million? The contract alone is worth that much, but the real impact would have been much larger. If we'd lost this deal, we would have had to lay off workers in 3 countries. Our suppliers would have been affected. The automotive company would have had to find new partners, which could have delayed their product launch by months. Robert gathered his papers, organizing them into neat stacks. I've been in international business for 30 years. I've worked with professional translators, cultural consultants, and international communication specialists. I've never seen anyone combine linguistic ability, technical knowledge, and cultural understanding the way you just did. Maya's mind was racing. She kept thinking about all the rejection letters she'd received, all the job interviews where she'd been told she wasn't qualified, all the nights she'd stayed up late working on freelance translation projects that barely paid enough to cover her expenses. But I don't have experience, she said, almost to herself. That's what everyone always told me. No experience in corporate environments, no track record with major international projects. Experience? Robert raised an eyebrows. You just managed a crisis that my entire international team couldn't handle. You coordinated solutions across 3 countries and 4 languages, while serving coffee to other customers. You demonstrated more practical experience in 1 hour than most people gain in their first year of corporate work. Maya looked at the business card in her hands. The paper was thick and expensive, with a subtle texture that spoke of quality and importance. The Sterling Global Industries logo was embossed in silver. She had dreamed of working for a company like this, but it had always seemed impossible. Like wanting to fly to the moon. I should get back to work, she said weakly, gesturing toward the espresso machine where a small line of customers had formed. Maya, Robert said, his voice gentle but serious. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question? She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Are you happy here? Making coffee, I mean. Is this what you want to be doing with your life? The question hit her like a physical blow. Maya looked around the cafe that had been her world for the past 18 months. The familiar smell of coffee beans and vanilla. The regular customers who knew her name and always left generous tips. The co-workers who had become friends. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't the life she had dreamed of when she was studying late into the night. Earning her degrees, learning languages, preparing for a career that had never materialized. No, she said quietly. I love the people here and I'm grateful for the job, but this isn't what I studied for. This isn't what I meant to do. Robert smiled, and for the first time since he'd walked into the cafe, he looked completely relaxed. Then I have a proposition for you. But first I need to make one more phone call. This one's to my headquarters in New York. He dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. Patricia? It's Robert. I need you to cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day and set up an emergency meeting with the International Communications Department for tomorrow morning. I think I just found our new director. Maya's heart stopped. She was pretty sure she had misheard what he just said. But Robert was looking directly at her, and his smile was getting bigger by the second. Maya stared at Robert's phone, where the voice of his assistant Patricia was confirming the meeting cancellations from the New York headquarters. Her brain felt like it was moving through thick fog. Had he really just said new director? Director of what? Director of coffee making. That had to be it. This was all some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. Robert, I think there's been some confusion. Patricia's voice crackled through the speaker. The International Communications Director position isn't open. Catherine has been in that role for 8 years. Robert's smile got even bigger. Catherine is being promoted to Senior Vice President of Global Operations. We've been planning to expand the International Communications Department for months, but we couldn't find the right person to lead it. I think I just found her. Maya felt like she might faint. The other customers in the cafe were no longer pretending not to listen. They were openly staring now, some with their phones out, probably posting about the strangest job interview in coffee shop history. Behind the counter, her co-worker Jake was standing there with his mouth hanging open, a half-made latte forgotten in his hands. Patricia, I'm going to send you some information about a candidate I want to interview. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week if necessary. This is priority 1, and of course, Robert. Should I have HR prepare the standard interview packet for the international communications role? No, Robert said, looking directly at Maya. This isn't going to be a standard interview. I'll call you back with details. He hung up and turned his full attention to Maya. Sit down, he said gently. You look like you're about to pass out. Maya collapsed into the chair across from him, still clutching his business card. I don't understand what's happening right now. What's happening, Robert said, is that I'm offering you a job. Not just any job. I want you to head up a new division of international communications for Sterling Global Industries. You would be responsible for coordinating communication between our facilities in 49 countries. You'd manage a team of translators, cultural consultants, and communication specialists. You'd travel internationally, work with government officials, negotiate with international partners, and solve the kind of problems you just solved for me, but on a much larger scale. Maya's hands were shaking. But I've never managed anyone. I've never worked in a corporate environment. I don't know anything about running a department. Maya, Robert said, leaning forward, in 1 hour, you coordinated solutions to complex problems across 3 countries. You understood technical specifications, cultural nuances, and business requirements that most people with years of corporate experience wouldn't have grasped. You communicated clearly with people who were frustrated and confused. and you turned potential disasters into success stories. He gestured around the cafe, and you did all of this while continuing to serve other customers, managing multiple conversations simultaneously, and keeping everyone happy. If that's not management and leadership skills, I don't know what is. Maya looked around the cafe, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. She had been managing complex situations here every day, handling difficult customers, coordinating with suppliers, training new employees, solving problems on the fly. She just hadn't thought of it as management experience because it was happening in a coffee shop instead of a corporate boardroom. What would the salary be? She asked, then immediately felt embarrassed for asking. I'm sorry, that's probably not the right question to ask first. Robert laughed. It's exactly the right question to ask first. You have student loans to pay off, don't you? Maya nodded, wondering how he knew that. The starting salary would be $150,000 per year, plus performance bonuses, plus international travel allowances, plus full health and dental benefits, plus a company car, plus stock options in Sterling Global Industries. Maya's brain stopped working completely. $150,000 per year. She currently made $28,000 per year at the cafe. The number was so large it didn't seem real. She could pay off her student loans in 2 years instead of 20. She could move out of her tiny studio apartment. She could stop eating ramen noodles for dinner every night. She started, then stopped. That's more money than I ever imagined making. It's what the position is worth, Robert said simply. International communications directors at major corporations typically make between $120,000 and $200,000 per year, depending on experience and the size of the company. Sterling Global Industries is one of the largest international companies in the world. We pay competitive salaries because we need the best people. Maya thought about her parents who had worked 2 jobs each to pay for her education. They had sacrificed so much to give her opportunities they never had. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night and worked in a grocery store during the day. Her father drove delivery trucks and did weekend construction work. They had never made more than $50,000 per year combined, yet they had somehow managed to help her through college. I need to call my parents, she said suddenly. They won't believe this. Before you call anyone, Robert said, I need you to understand what this job would involve. It's not easy work. You'd be responsible for communications that affect millions of dollars in contracts and thousands of jobs around the world. You'd be dealing with government officials, corporate executives, and international regulations. The decisions you make would have real consequences for real people. Maya thought about the phone calls they had just finished. Heinrich in Munich, who was worried about meeting production deadlines. Claude in Paris, who was stressed about shipping delays. Giuseppe in Milan, who wanted to make sure the quality standards were perfect. These weren't just voices on the phone. They were people with families and responsibilities. People whose livelihoods depended on clear communication and good decisions. I understand, she said. That's exactly why I studied linguistics and international business. I want to help people communicate better. I want to solve problems that matter. Robert nodded approvingly. There's one more thing. The position would require you to relocate to New York City. Sterling Global's international headquarters are in Manhattan. Is that something you'd be willing to do? Maya looked around the cafe one more time. Seattle had been her home for 2 years, but it had never really felt like home. It was just the place where she had ended up, working a job she had never planned to keep, waiting for her real life to begin. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'd be willing to relocate. Robert reached into his briefcase and pulled out a leather portfolio. I'm going to give you something that I've never given to anyone in 30 years of running this company. I'm going to make you a formal job offer right here. Right now, without interviews, without reference checks, without any of the usual corporate bureaucracy. He opened the portfolio and started writing on official Sterling Global Industries letterhead. Maya watched him fill in details, including her name, the position title, the salary, and the start date. I'm offering you 2 weeks to consider this offer, he said, continuing to write. That will give you time to finish out your notice here, arrange for moving to New York, and prepare for your new role. But Maya, I want you to know that this offer is real and it's not going away. You saved our company today, and I believe you have the potential to revolutionize how we communicate internationally. He signed the document with an expensive-looking pen, then slid it across the table to her. Maya stared at the formal job offer, with all the details spelled out in black ink. Director of International Communications, $150,000 per year. Start date in 3 weeks. Behind the counter, her coworkers were still staring in amazement. Jake had apparently given up on the latte entirely and was just standing there with his mouth open. Regular customers were whispering to each other and pointing. Someone had definitely started recording video. Maya looked up at Robert, who was watching her with the same kind expression he'd had when she first offered to help with his phone calls. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." "I know everything I need to know," Robert said. "You saw someone who needed help and you helped even though it wasn't your responsibility. You have skills that most people spend years trying to develop. You care about doing things right, not just doing things fast. And you have the kind of natural leadership ability that can't be taught in business school." He stood up and started gathering his papers. "But mostly I'm doing this because 30 years ago, someone gave me a chance when I was young and unknown and had more potential than experience. That chance changed my life, and it led to the creation of a company that now employs hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Maybe it's time for me to give someone else that same kind of chance." Maya stood up too, still holding the job offer like it might disappear if she let go. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Robert said, extending his hand. "And Maya, thank you. You didn't just save our company today. You reminded me why I love international business in the first place. It's about connecting people, solving problems, and making the world a little bit smaller and more understanding." Maya shook his hand, feeling like she was in a dream that she never wanted to wake up from. As Robert walked toward the door, he turned back one more time.